Okay, good morning. We are in the middle of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, chapter 273. We are at Halacha 6. What did we do so far? We described three categories of changing places between Kiddush and meal. House to house, in which case, even if you had intention to go there, it doesn't help. Your Kiddush is not valid because there was no Kiddush in the place of the meal, unless extraneous circumstances, and you can see from the place you're eating, you can see the place you made Kiddush through a window or something. Second designation is room to room within a house, in which case, having in mind that you're moving rooms does help. And number three, even though in the first instance one shouldn't do that. And the third one is in the same room, changing spots from corner to corner, in which case it's perfectly fine. Even if you didn't have in mind, even if you don't see the spot, but in the best case, you should know before and be able to see it. That was number one. The next thing we discussed was how one should be eating Kiddush right away. And there should be the temporal association between your Kiddush and your meal. So if when you made Kiddush, you were not expecting to eat in that spot, and you take some time off, then you've disconnected your Kiddush from your meal, and you have to eat right away, otherwise it's disconnected. If, however, you knew that you were going to be eating your meal, you just took a break because of whatever, you got into a conversation with someone, so long as you didn't leave the room, there's still the association between your Kiddush and your meal. This is where we left off. And now there's two more things to do, which is someone listening to this Kiddush. What's their obligation in terms of Kiddush in the place of their meal, one who's listening? And then how much does one have to eat to constitute a meal to satisfy this law that Kiddush requires a meal? This is where we are, yeah? Halacha vav then. Yachal Adam, a person is allowed, a person may, lakadesh, to make Kiddush la'acherim for others. Even though the person making the Kiddush isn't eating. So there's no Kiddush for it's not Kiddush in the place of his meal. He'll be making Kiddush maybe somewhere else where he'll be eating, but he's doing it for the other people.
Oh,
sorry?
Maybe not.
It can't be for himself because he's not eating there.
Oh.
And his Kiddush wouldn't.
Right.
Or he already did Kiddush.
Or he already did Kiddush and ate somewhere else. He's making now Kiddush for someone else. So he's not eating there, that's okay. This does not violate the need to have a Kiddush in the place of the meal. Why is that? Because the listeners, who are now fulfilling their obligation with this Kiddush, it is their place of meal, and therefore the Kiddush is valid.
Only if they say Amen.
Yeah, the whole Kiddush is for them. Right? So he's not making. Yeah, it's built on the law of the one who makes Kiddush in Shul. Right? The one who makes Kiddush in Shul, which we learned was for the sake of guests who are eating in the shul or in the room adjacent to the shul, the person making the Kiddush is not fulfilling his obligation in that Kiddush, right? That's what we learned. He has to go home and make Kiddush again, which means you can make Kiddush for someone else, and it's the place of their meal, the guests, and your own you do somewhere else. So whoever is fulfilling his obligation in that Kiddush has to eat in that spot in order for the Kiddush to be satisfied. This rule that it has to be in place of a meal. Not the one making Kiddush, but the one who's fulfilling their obligation in the Kiddush. So ordinarily, the one who's saying Kiddush is the one fulfilling his obligation as well. But in this case, it's not the person making the Kiddush who's fulfilling his obligation, it's one listening. So the listener has to have Kiddush in that spot.
So he just drinks enough of wine and makes a proper.
Or not even. He can give the other person to drink wine, right? We looked at in the case of the Kiddush in the place of the meal, in the Kiddush in the shul also. They can give someone else to drink the wine.
Yeah, he take his cup and pour a little bit for each person.
He doesn't even.
A little bit for him.
He doesn't even have to take anything himself either. No, but someone, because again, this Kiddush is not doing it for himself. He's doing it only for the other people. for them, so he can give them the cup of wine to drink. Well, let's see. So we come up with a list. Because this person is not fulfilling his obligation in the Kiddush, he's only doing it for the sake of the people listening. The chain as well. Or maybe, like you suggested, he already made Kiddush earlier in the place of his meal, somewhere else. Because he doesn't need this Kiddush, he's doing it for the others. In the first instance, he should not make Kiddush for someone else. They should do it themselves. Only if the circumstances are such, that they don't know how to make Kiddush themselves. So that's why he's doing it for them.
Does this apply to a woman? Or
it does apply to a woman, yeah.
it does apply to she
Yeah.
can't do Kiddush
Yeah.
herself, right?
That's right. So, or no, she could do Kiddush herself,
She could do
but if it happens to be that she can't, yeah,
Oh,
a
but
woman
she
can make
could?
Kiddush. Yeah.
So if I did Kiddush at synagogue, my wife can do Kiddush at home for her and the kids.
In theory, yes, but in practice, we don't do that.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's look at footnote 21. Footnote 21. If they do not know how to recite Kiddush, even if they do not know how to recite the blessing Borei Pri Hagafen, the other person, the person making Kiddush, may recite the blessing Borei Pri Hagafen as well. Now, why is this important? Sorry? Because the principle is, we're going to see, the principle is that a bracha of a mitzvah, I can make a bracha for you, and you fulfill your obligation in my bracha when I say, and you say amen to my bracha. When it comes to the bracha of a mitzvah. When it comes to the bracha over enjoying something, say I'm enjoying food, so only the person who's actually enjoying may make that bracha. In the case of Kiddush, you have both brachas. You have bracha over mitzvah, the bracha Kiddush, let's say Friday night, the Kiddush, the bracha over Shabbos. And then you have the other bracha, which is a bracha over the wine, the Borei Pri Hagafen. So he's adding in the footnote, as we're going to see soon, because Borei Pri Hagafen, in this case, is the result of Kiddush, it gets the status of Kiddush. It gets the status of the bracha of a mitzvah. And therefore, even if I'm not drinking the wine, I can make it for someone else. Although ordinarily I could not. Only in the Kiddush circumstance I can. Right? So the person making Kiddush can say Borei Pri Hagafen if the other people don't know how to, even though I'm not drinking, as we'll see. Moreover, continues the footnote, in a pressing situation, a person who does not eat with them may recite Kiddush on their behalf, even if they know how to recite the blessing of Kiddush. For whatever the reasons are, they're not making Kiddush, he is. Okay, back to the main text. What? What does he do?
You go to his house. You can rush us and say, I'll say Kiddush. Just say amen.
Yeah. But in that case, he's making Kiddush for himself too.
Yeah.
This is a case where he's not making Kiddush for himself, which means he's not even drinking the wine. Right? So there are two cases here in which he's not making Kiddush for himself. Either A, he already made Kiddush for himself somewhere else, and he's doing it now again for them. Or B, he hasn't made Kiddush yet, but he doesn't plan on eating here. He's just doing it for them, and he's going to go somewhere else to eat his meal. Right? So in that case, what's the problem he runs into? He's not allowed to drink the wine. Why? For the same reason why the guy in Shul can't drink the wine when he makes Kiddush. Because you're not allowed to drink before your own Kiddush. You cannot drink anything before you've made Kiddush. This Kiddush is not yours, it's someone else's. So I cannot drink the wine over which I'm making Kiddush for them because I haven't made Kiddush yet. Even though I'm technically making Kiddush, but I'm not fulfilling my obligation here.
So a scenario like this, for example, God forbid, would be, let's say, in a hospital, if a rabbi will go from room to room,
There we go.
do Kiddush for them, he doesn't drink. Even
Exactly.
if they can do it, but they're not in a
Correct.
shape to do it.
That's right. So they'll drink the wine instead. He can't drink the wine. And then when he goes home to his wife, he'll make Kiddush and eat the other for himself. That's what he says now in the next paragraph. If he hasn't yet made Kiddush for himself, so now he's only doing it for their sake. He has to be careful that he shouldn't drink anything of that Kiddush that he's making now. Why? Because it's forbidden for him to eat until he makes Kiddush in the place of his meal. right? Nonetheless, should be Kiddush zeh. He can make B'rei Paragafen for them in their Kiddush, even though he's not drinking the wine.
But if you drink it also.
So again,
Not if he's not eating it.
no, you can't drink because he hasn't made Kiddush yet. You're not allowed to drink before you make Kiddush, even though he's now making Kiddush, but he's not fulfilling his obligation in that Kiddush. So he can't drink until he's fulfilled his obligation of Kiddush.
But he takes a little bite of something.
If he does, then then he's making Kiddush and he's eating in the place of his Kiddush. But in theory, we're talking theoretically now.
And then he goes home. Thank you.
You're making Kiddush again for who?
So,
He already made Kiddush for himself. If he ate something there, then he made Kiddush for himself.
but if he goes home, he's got another family there.
Now he's doing it for them, not for himself. Okay, that's why I asked, who's he doing it for?
We get off standard, but
Follow?
yeah, he didn't. That's what he had in mind. He wasn't going to fulfill his obligation.
Yeah.
And after he changes his mind and he drinks.
So like we learned in the previous halacha, he'd have to do it right away. Because otherwise you lose a temporal association. You'd have to eat it right. You have to eat that right away.
Okay, so that would fall under that.
That's right. But I'm not actually, although I'm not so convinced actually in that case, because in this case,
No, the other case was he didn't know the law. He didn't know the rule. Here he has an intent that he will not satisfy Kiddush.
exactly. As I say, why it's
Not
different.
exactly.
If he has in mind he's not fulfilling his Kiddush, I don't think he fulfills his Kiddush.
Even though
he can't change his mind
even though he
retroactively.
drinks, right? Because
He
it's
cannot-
too late.
Too late already. That's correct. That's right. So again, this is the case where he didn't make Kiddush yet. He's making it for someone else. It's not his brachas, it's their brachas. He's verbalizing it, but it's their brachas. If he had- It's correct. He's just their mouthpiece. They are making the brachas. It just happens to be his voice. Right? He hasn't, so therefore the Kiddush he's making now, he's not fulfilling his obligation. And if he hasn't made Kiddush yet, then he cannot drink from the wine. Right? Nonetheless, as I just explained earlier, even though ordinarily, as I explained, when you are making a bracha over something you enjoy, if I myself am not partaking of the food over which I'm making a bracha, I cannot make it for someone else. Even if they don't know how to make a bracha. If someone else does not know how to make a bracha eitz, I cannot make a eitz, have that guy say, Amen, and let him eat the apple. I have to eat the apple also.
You have to eat it, but it still takes him out. If he said amen, and
So that's correct. If we're both eating an apple, I say a bracha, he says Amen, he fulfilled his obligation in the bracha. If I'm not eating the apple, I cannot do that. That's usually the rule. So over here, the hagafen should be the same thing. Because the hagafen is not over the Shabbos, it's not a mitzvah bracha, it's a bracha over wine.
but it goes up to the Kiddush.
It goes on the Kiddush. Nonetheless, hagafen shal Kiddush. When you're making a hagafen in Kiddush, ben shal yom, ben shal laila, whether it's at night or at day. This is very interesting. The nighttime Kiddush has how many brachas? 2. One over Shabbos, one over hagafen. And what's out there telling us? That the hagafen here is taken out of the ordinary class of hagafen when I cannot fulfill the obligation for you unless I'm also drinking with you, and puts it into the Kiddush category where I may make it for you, even though I'm not enjoying. But now he's adding even the day Kiddush. The day Kiddush has how many brachas? Just one, just hagafen. And yet, because it's a Kiddush hagafen, it gets into the status of Kiddush, even though there's no other bracha here.
That's in Shabbos and.
We mention it, but it's not in the bracha. We don't say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. And- Yeah, that's all introductory blood. That's right. But it's not a bracha. Nonetheless, because it's Kiddush, it gets the status of Kiddush, even though the bracha is only hagafen. That's correct. That's right. That's right. Moreover, the same thing is true of hamoitzi if I was making Kiddush on bread. So get this. I'm making Kiddush for someone else. I'm making Kiddush for someone else. There's no wine available. There's challah.
Treat it like the one.
Or the other person's not allowed to drink alcohol, let's say. In the hospital, this guy can't drink alcohol. He's not in a condition to be making Kiddush. So I'm making Kiddush for him over bread. So I would make hamoitzi, and then that person would eat the bread.
You don't have to eat
And
it.
I would not eat the bread because I haven't fulfilled my Kiddush yet. And I cannot eat before I made Kiddush. So I make a Yom HaShishi, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, v'yitzi lechem ha'aretz, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher baruch banu b'kol hamim, and then go on to the bracha of Shabbos, and then give the other person the challah to eat. So wild scenario, but this is the way it is. right? So einan doimes l'shar brachas hanenin. This hagafen and this hamoitzi that's associated with Kiddush is not to be compared to other brachas that I'm making over food, where I cannot fulfill your obligation unless I'm also eating. Why? Because this bracha hagafen, this hamoitzi, this Kiddush bracha is an obligation. And once it becomes an obligation, it goes into the mitzvah category in which I can do it for you. Is explained in subsection in chapter 167.
Sitting at the Shabbos table, and somebody makes the brook over the bread, and then gives it to everybody. I always make the brook myself.
So, who are you? Are you the leader or the follower?
Follower.
Okay, that's a truth, but unrelated to this. Actually, it is related somewhat because the hamoitzi we spoke about here is only if the hamoitzi is in your kiddush. If you make kiddush on wine and then have hamoitzi, you cannot fulfill the obligation for someone else unless you're also eating the bread. And then it's back to regular. Right? So in the case you're describing, the truth is, as per a letter that I wrote, that when you get a slice of challah, even though you heard the other person make a bracha, and you said, Amen, you should make your own hamoitzi on your own challah. That's many don't have the custom to do so. Never writes in the letter that you do so. But I should make something very clear. This is a tangent, but there's two obligations in your bracha hamoitzi at your Shabbos meal. One is the hamoitzi over bread, like you would be making over bread every other day. If you were eating bread, you have to make hamoitzi. And obligation two is you have to have lechem mishnah. You have to have two breads together when you make the bracha.
Right.
Now, when the other person makes the bracha, the leader, he's holding two breads. When you get it, you're only holding one slice, which is why many will not make a bracha hamoitzi on that slice because they want to fulfill from the hamoitzi of the leader because the leader's holding two slices of bread, two loaves, and that's what you want to do on Kiddush, to have on Shabbos to have two loaves. The Rebbe in a letter splits it in half and says, when I say amen to the listener, I fulfill my obligation for the two loaves. And then I make a bracha for myself again because I don't know, maybe 2-3 minutes has transpired from his bracha till I got my slice. So I make a new hagaf about hamoitzi. So I say amen to the leader to fulfill having two loaves, and then I make a bracha again for myself on the hamoitzi. This is the right to the letter.
But then you do Netilat Yadayim twice.
No, everybody did Netilat Yadayim. We're all sitting around a table.
Yeah, so if let's say my dad threw me a slice.
When did he make a hamoitzi? He made hamoitzi first.
He made a motzi. We all
Right.
did Netilat Yadayim. He made a motzi. He gives me a piece. I eat it, but now I want to do my own motzi. I don't have to go wash my hands again.
And why are you doing your own motzi?
Because you're saying how the Rebbe said it.
On the slice, on that slice that he gave you, you make a motzi.
Oh, on that
Yes.
slice.
So
But
when
I
you
needed that
first,
make a
that's right.
motzi again.
That's right. So he said hamoitzi the two loaves, and you fulfill your obligation for shlecha mishnah. When he gives you a slice, you make again hamoitzi. Others disagree with this, but that's what the right to do. I think I did a class on it that's somewhere online on the lecha mishnah. Sorry?
Yeah, no, I'm not doing this. I just want to know.
I think I did a class. I think on the YouTube channel somewhere there's a class on lecha mishnah where I explain this whole thing. Okay, so halacha zayin. Let's finish the. Oh, okay, we're not going to finish it today. Okay, halacha zayin. Hoyru hagoinim. The goinim, that is the sages of the post Talmudic era, they instructed shezeh she'amru chachamim. That which our sages said. The sages in our Gemara, they said, "Ein kiddush ela b'makom suda." Kiddush does not qualify as a valid kiddush unless it's in the place of a meal. That was the statement of our sages. So the post-Talmudic sages instructed, "Ein tzarich sheyigmar kol sham kol sedasa." It is not a requirement to complete his entire meal there, because as we explained, the statement is not your meal requires kiddush. It's kiddush requires a meal, so I don't need to finish my entire meal at the presence of my kiddush. Ella, rather, afilu macha kazayis. Even if you ate just a kazayit, the amount size of an olive, of bread, which is the center of a meal, halachically. Oya afilu, or even if it wasn't actual bread, but kazayis mechameshet haminim, he ate a kazayis, a olive, size of an olive, of one of the other 5 grains. Right? What are they? And footnote 27: wheat, barley, rye, oats, and spelt. So a cookie. Upon which we make the blessing, so it's not hamoitzi. which is the optimal of a meal. So he eats a kazayas of a mitzi, which would be more laborious because he's got to go wash. Then he has a full benching afterwards, all to eat a little olive size, all to satisfy his kiddush. Much easier if you just pick up a cookie.
Yeah.
Right? So it's either an olive sized bread or olive sized mezonus, or if the person drank a revius is a halachic measure, which is about 3.5 ounces. Okay, they're right here. A revius is a liquid measure equivalent to 86 cc. 2.9 fluid ounces. They make it even less than 3.5. 2.9. 3.5 is a bigger measure. Anyway, so he olive sized bread, olive sized mezonus, or a revius of wine. Milvad koisa kiddush. A revius of wine in addition to his cup of kiddush, because there's the wine he's drinking as part of his kiddush, and then another cup of wine to satisfy making kiddush in the place of your meal.
Oh, so you do kiddush and you take one big gulp, it doesn't count.
Right.
Okay.
Split into two. Usually the kiddush cups probably have more than two revius, so you can drink half. That's your kiddush wine. Drink the other half. That's your meal wine. Yaitz was you take kiddush with this. One has satisfied the law to have kiddush in the place of the meal. It continues. And then once he's satisfied that, he can go somewhere else and have his meal. Whether it's right away, whether it's later, it's irrelevant. His kiddush obligation was fulfilled in the place of a meal, at the bare minimum meal, and then he can go eat his meal somewhere else. And he doesn't have to make kiddush again before that other meal. Whether it's later Friday night or whether it's later in the Shabbos afternoon. Because he's already fulfilled his obligation to make kiddush, and he did so in the place of a meal, then that later meal which he has, it's like the third meal, over which you don't have to make a bracha. Okay, here.
So the third meal is any time after you've made kiddush for that day meal?
Yeah, basically. That's a good question.
Even if it's before.
And when we do that actually? This past year we did it, or 2 years ago.
Oh, for Pesach.
When Erev Pesach is Shabbos, and you have to eat chametz before a certain time, and you got to get and you have to get 2 meals in there. So you make kiddush, you eat, you wash, you eat, you bench, and if you're having shal shudas, you wash, you eat, and bench again, even though you didn't make that milcha yet.
This applies to Havdalah also?
Havdalah in the place of a meal? No, it's only kiddush.
And there's no kiddush in Havdalah, there's just proliferation.
There is 2 brachas. There's hamavdil,
Okay.
but you don't have to have a meal in the place of that kiddush.
You don't have
No. It's only kiddush. Okay, halacha ches. Aval bat im ochal peiros, if he ate fruits, not a mezonus, right? So it's mezonus, wine, or hamoitzi. If he didn't do any of those, he just ate fruit. Afilu harbe, even if he ate tons and he's full. Is likewise if he drank other beverages, a cup of orange juice.
Other fruits.
Sorry,
Other fruits too. Foods.
the other fruits. Sorry, or he drank something else. Even if those foods get the designation of the choice drink of the land, a culturally choice drink. So it's the kind of drink. This is a certain designation which is relative to other halachas, where, like for example, kiddush during the day. Friday night we are particular to make kiddush on wine, but during Shabbat during the day we're more lenient. Even though in the first instance you should make kiddush on wine, but we're more lenient that you can make kiddush on what's called chamar medina. Chamar medina means that which the society deems a drink of choice. So whiskey or beer. A good way to qualify this is: would you invite someone over to your house for that? You're not going to invite someone. That's right. Only. Yeah. Sorry.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, for sure. By Shabbos they were more lenient, or at Havdalah also. So, for example, a way to think about this choice drink is: would you invite someone to your house for it? You're not going to invite someone to your house and say, "Hey, let's come over for a glass of water." But you will invite someone over and say, "Hey, let's have a beer. Let's have a whiskey." Right? So it's kind of drink that you would invite someone over. It demonstrates that this is a drink of choice. Now, says Dr. Rebbe, even if your meal that you're having after your kiddush is made of one such drink, this does not satisfy Kiddush in the place of a meal. So you couldn't make Kiddush of wine and then drink a glass of whiskey as your meal. But you could drink another glass of wine as your meal. I'll explain why in a second. Yeah.
Watching YouTube yesterday, now to go to some 20 types of food that you should never eat. And one of them was beer. And they said all beers have, I think it's an oyster.
Talking about for kosher reasons?
No, very good. All beers have an extract of it's oyster.
I don't know. Send me the information. I'd like to see it. Send me that. I'd like to see that. Okay, so if he, instead of bread, hamoitzi or mazonos, he made shahakol, basically, drink. Even if that drink is a special drink, it's an expensive whiskey. This does not satisfy the halacha to have a meal in the place of your kiddush. So why is wine an exception? The halacha is, based on the verse, that wine satisfies the heart. And therefore, a meal that follows your kiddush has to be the kind of food that is satisfactory, that satiates. Wine satiates the heart, and starch, mazonos, hamoitzi, satisfies the stomach. Otherwise, it doesn't count. So there aminim and the five grains, mazonos, nekroyim mazin. It's referred to in the verse as a meal by our sages. Therefore, so that therefore on these, on wine and mazonos, we can call it a meal. And this is not the case of other drinks or fruit.
It's funny. I guess the grains are considered a meal, but let's say if you had a piece of meat, it wouldn't.
That's correct. Halachically speaking, your steak is not a meal like your mazonos, which is I always feel like quasi awkward around this. Nowadays you can have a full meal in a restaurant that you pay tons of money for, and you don't make anything but a shahakol. That's it. I almost feel like cheating the bracha system. That's the way it is. Okay, one more halacha to close up, and then we'll get to the next section, the last set of laws tomorrow. Tess, yesh omrim, there are those that say. So what did we say till now? In addition to your kiddush, you have to have your meal. So, in addition to your kiddush, either hamoitzi, mazonos, or another cup of wine. It says the Alter Rebbe, yesh omrim, there are those that say, shafilu shasar revi'is yain mekosa kiddush. Even if you drank a revi'is wine of your very cup of kiddush, not an additional one, not an additional cup of wine, but the wine of kiddush itself. There is that view that that itself qualifies kiddush in the place of every meal. Okay, so here's the question. If in this view, if the wine you're drinking out of your kiddush cup is already considered your meal, then what's special about this law that you have to have kiddush in the place of your meal? You're always having it in the place of a meal because you're always drinking wine.
Well, how much you're drinking?
How much are you drinking? So halachically speaking, the bare minimum of kiddush is not to drink a full revi'is, but to drink the majority of a revi'is. In that case, you haven't satisfied kiddush in the place of a meal. But once you drank a full revi'is, you satisfied kiddush in the place of a meal. Which means from this perspective, nowadays, almost never is anyone making kiddush not in the place of their meal, because you're always drinking a full revi'is. Not so much, it's 2.9 fluid ounces, not a lot. Right? Now, how does this come relevant? Let's look at number 35, footnote 35. From this ruling, see it, 35? Should be in the last page, I think. The second to last page, you got it? Here. One page back. There you go. So from this ruling, Mincha Shabbos section 7736 derives the following law. A person who recited Kiddush and drank one full revi'is of wine, but did not eat anything else. So in that case, according to the first opinion, he did not fulfill the Kiddush in the place of his meal. But according to this opinion we just read, he is fulfilling the Kiddush in the place of his meal. If that's the case, this person should not recite Kiddush again when he partakes of his meal. For it is possible, according to this view, that he fulfilled his obligation for Kiddush he previously recited. And therefore, he should listen to the recitation of Kiddush by another person in order to fulfill his obligation, and then he must then partake of a meal in that place. What's he trying to say? Halacha is that when you're in a doubt as to whether or not you're obligated to make a bracha, what do? You don't make a bracha. Safek brachas lahakal. If you're in doubt as to whether you put on tefillin today, you put on tefillin again. But when you put on tefillin again the second time, you don't make a bracha on the tefillin. Why? Because maybe you already, actually no, in that case you would make a bracha again, because anyways you have to make a bracha again. But other examples. Lulav esrog. You're not sure if you took lulav esrog in the morning. You're not sure if you picked up your lulav esrog in the morning on Sukkot. You'd have to pick it up again later. But when you picked it up again later to do the mitzvah, you would not make a bracha. Because you cannot make a bracha in a case, one second, you cannot make a bracha in a case where you're in doubt. If you're not sure if you fulfilled your obligation, you don't make a bracha.
You would think it's the opposite.
This is the ruling. Because we don't want to take Hashem's name in vain. So unless you're 100% sure you need to make the bracha, you don't make a bracha. Okay. Now in this case, the person who made Kiddush drank a full revius of wine. Now he's in a case of doubt. Because one opinion says he didn't fulfill his Kiddush because he didn't eat anything afterwards. But this opinion says, yes, if you drank a full revius, you did fulfill your obligation. If that's the case, you may not make Kiddush again because maybe you actually fulfilled your obligation. And maybe you're making an extra bracha for no reason. So what do? You have to listen to someone else make Kiddush and then eat your meal.
Can you also just do it for someone else?
Or do it for someone else, in which case the other person's fulfilling his obligation through your Kiddush.
Oh,
but you can't be doing it for yourself. That's right. You can't be doing it yourself
you
again
say
because you can't, exactly, because you cannot make a bracha again because maybe you did it the first time right.
Better if you just hear it.
And therefore, that's right. So if a person made Kiddush and drank a full revius, didn't eat anything else, so by the letter of the law, he did not fulfill his obligation to have Kiddush in the place of his meal. But maybe he did because of this one opinion. And therefore, when he comes to actually eating his meal, he should hear someone else make Kiddush, answer Amen, and have his meal. Sorry?
What if you're alone?
Good question, I don't know. But based on this reasoning, it would seem like he can't, I don't know.
Well, it says not to, and if possible, hear someone else.
Yeah.
Okay, according to the first opinion, that's you do have to drink not only the revius from the Kiddush cup, but an additional cup.
Yeah.
How is that How does that work practically? Do you do bread for the guffin on that second?
No, you don't make another hagafen, no.
You just drink another.
We drink one revius and you drink another one.
You drink another one.
And that's it. Exactly. Okay, let's conclude. You can rely on this opinion which says that the full revius counts as the place of a meal in a place when you need. Going, for example, we had this earlier, the Kiddush of basic Nesses, when you're making Kiddush and Shul Friday night. Remember that? We discussed the Kiddush on Friday night when we said that because you're not fulfilling your obligation, the one making Kiddush and Shul Friday night, he's not fulfilling his obligation, he's doing it for the guests, right? Or just to keep the custom going. So because he's not fulfilling his obligation, really he shouldn't drink any of the wine, because you're not allowed to drink wine before you fulfill your obligation of Kiddush. So what did we say he should do? We said he should give it to a child, right? The child should drink the wine. Remember?
Right, because there are no members that are.
Because there are no members who are actually fulfilling the obligation.
Right.
So you can give it to the child. What if there isn't a child? Said the Alter Rebbe, you have to drink the wine yourself. And if that's the case, you fulfilled your obligation. And if that's the case, you can't make Kiddush again at home later, unless you're doing it for your family. Right? In that case, the Alter Rebbe said,
drinking one cup.
In that case, he's drinking one cup and he's relying on this opinion.
That's the proof.
He's relying on this opinion which says the cup of your Kiddush is enough for the plate for the Kiddush in your meal. Or, for example, a case of a milah, a bris. This is a complicated thing, but a person's basically he's making a bris in the morning on Shabbos. It's before the meal. He's not eating in that spot. The cup he's making the bracha agafen over the bris, right? By bris you make agafen, and you make a bracha when you give the baby name. He's also making Kiddush in that cup, which is Shabbos day. The Kiddush is just agafen, right? Footnote 37 discusses this more, and he can't drink yet because he's not really making Kiddush in the place of his meal until much later. So what does he do? He gives it to a child. But if there is no child present to drink, He has to drink it himself. If that's the case, he is fulfilling his obligation of Kiddush. If that's the case, he has to give his Kiddush in the place of his meal. So he's relying on this opinion, which says that the one Revius is drinking is the meal.
Wait, you could do a bris on Shabbat?
You have to. If it's the 8th day, you have to.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big
You're
mitzvah.
allowed to cut on-
You have to, yeah. Big mitzvah.
That breaks all the rules.
Yeah. Okay, so if it's a Friday night in Shul and it's a bris, and he cannot give the wine he just made a bracha on to a child to drink, Yishta Gadol, an adult will drink it. Revius Shlema, complete revius. And he will fulfill it, he will have in mind that he's fulfilling his obligation of Kiddush. And he's drinking that cup as a meal. And rely on this opinion which says that the full revius is a meal. Commission is is explained in chapter 269, which we learned, which are the laws of Kiddush in the Shul. Conclusion in parentheses. Nevertheless, im efsher, if it's possible, obviously, it's best if he drinks a second revius to follow the majority opinion, which says that your meal has to be an additional cup of wine. Lavad revius, in addition to at least the majority of the revius, Kiddush, with which he made Kiddush, so that he can satisfy Kiddush in the place of a meal, according to all opinions, which everybody will agree. If you had a second cup, you definitely fulfilled your obligation. So only rely on this opinion that says that you can fulfill the obligation with one cup when you have no choice. And we learned in the footnote that if you did end up doing this, you cannot make Kiddush again later because, hey, maybe you did fulfill your obligation. You have to listen to someone else's Kiddush. Okay, tomorrow, God willing, we'll get to this further to this point of someone else listening to my Kiddush, fulfilling their obligation and eating a meal, even if they're in a different house. I make Kiddush, and my neighbors hear me through the window. Can they eat their meal there and fulfill making Kiddush in the place of their meal? We'll get to that, God willing, tomorrow, last 3 halachas, and then we will go back to the Gemara.
Practically, and then
Yes.
on
Shabbos morning, yeah.
somebody just have eaten a cookie and
Well,
or
they're not making Kiddush yet. They haven't made Kiddush yet because the bris is early in the morning. The Sudas mitzvah is going to happen in the next room over, or down the hall, wherever it is, or in the next, or another building, let's say even. Hypothetically.
But you could have in mind that it's in the same building. You have in mind the other one.
Okay, in theory, yeah.
Theory, right?
Yeah, you're looking for 37. It gives more
It's not
details.
really- it's a lot of book.
Yeah,
There's a way around obviously.
yeah. If the meal is being served somewhere else, then he has to. Yeah, if
Yeah,
it's meal in the
that's
same
right.
place, then yeah. Okay, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.